Right, today's video is how to find slope from an equation. So in the last video, we talked about finding slope from 2 points, and now we're going to find the slope when it's in the equation. Now the first thing we have to know basically is our basic equation of a slope, which we all know, if we remember, is y equals mx plus b, not p, but b. All right, so mx plus b. So this is our equation of a line. Now, our m is our slope. Okay, so whenever you see a number in the spot here for a line, that's going to be our slope, okay? And our slope is always attached to our x. That's how we know it's our slope. Slope is attached to the x. Our b is our y-intercept, okay? And the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, okay? So m attached to the x, that's our slope. That tells us how far up or down and left and right we're going to go. And our b is our y-intercept, and that tells us where the line crosses the y-axis, okay? So we'll get to graphing lines in the next segment, but in this one, we're going to find our slope from an equation so we know how to graph our line, okay? So let's start off with an example. So let me write this equation at the top. Okay. So first example, y equals 2x plus 1. Okay. Now, the first thing you have to make sure is that our y is by itself. Okay, it's by itself on the own side of the equal sign, and before we can say what our slope and y-intercept is. So if you look, our y is by itself, okay? It looks just like our equation up here, y equals mx plus b. It looks just like that, y equals mx plus b. So if we look, what number is attached to our x? Well, the number attached to the x is 2. So in this equation, 2 is going to be our slope, okay? Because 2 is attached to the x, just like here, right? Slope, y-intercept, okay? So in that case, our slope is 2, and our y-intercept would be 1, okay? And that's all there is to it. So if there's nothing, if there's just the y by itself and the numbers here, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to change anything, you don't have to solve for anything. It's already done for you. Just look, okay, what's attached to the x? The 2 is our slope. What's not attached? The y-intercept, the 1, that's our y-intercept, okay? Simple as that. Another example, y equals 3 over 4x minus 2, okay? So this one, once again, we look to see if our y is by itself. It is by itself over here. It's the same as our equation up here. So now, what's our slope? What's attached to our x? That's the 3/4. So our slope is 3 over 4, okay? You don't need to make it a decimal. You don't need to do anything with it. It's 3 over 4, okay? You leave it like that, and we'll get to that later of why that's going to make sense, okay? So then now, what's our y-intercept? Okay, well, once again, we look up here. It's a number not attached to the x. So we look, and we have -2. Now look, I know it's minus, okay? But treat this minus as a negative. So our y-intercept is -2, okay? So slope attached to the x, 3/4. Y-intercept, the other number, -2, okay? And that's all there is to it. Okay, now let's add some wrinkles to it. This is what we call, this is our mx plus b form. Now, x minus y equals 2. So now when we look at this one, this is what we call standard form. Okay, now standard form means that the y is not by itself yet. Okay, our slope form, y is by itself, that's what we need. But in this case, the y is not by itself yet. So we have to get the y by itself. Now, to do that, we must do what we've been doing for a while now, which is to get the y by itself, to move what we don't need away from the y to the other side of the equal sign. So we have x minus y equals 2. Okay, there are 2 steps in all of these things that you need to do. Okay, when getting y by itself, there's 2 steps. The first step is to move the x, okay? So whatever the x says it is, you do the opposite to get to the other side, okay? So we look at our x, it's a positive x, okay? So to get rid of a positive, we have to do the opposite and do minus x here and minus x here, okay? Now, this is where all the work we did with literal equations come in handy, because now we can just minus the x to this side. So that cancels that. Now we bring down our negative y. That's a minus y, and then minus has to come with it, okay? Negative y equals, and then we just leave it as negative x plus 2. Remember, we want the x to come first. That's why our x is first here. And it's negative x, so it's negative x, and then 2 is positive, plus 2. So that's our first step. Move the x is our first step. Our second step is to make sure the y is by itself. Now we have a negative in front of the y. We can't have that negative there. So what we do is we flip our signs, okay? So whatever, we flip this to the positive, and then we flip the signs over here to whatever the opposite is. So if we have a negative y here, we turn that to a positive y. Our negative x becomes a positive x, and our positive 2 becomes a negative 2. Okay, so I just flipped our signs, divided by negative 1, okay? Flipped our signs. So now our y is by itself, okay? So what's our slope going to be? Okay, well, let's look at our x. The x is by itself. So that when the x is by itself, our slope is just going to be 1, okay? And then our y-intercept, we look, and once again, it's a minus 2, so our y-intercept is negative 2, okay? So move the x to the other side, get the y by itself, okay? Divide by whatever's with the y. If it's negative, we just flip our signs, okay? 1, negative 2 is our slope y-intercept. So you can't just go up here and say, hey, oh, the y-intercept is, you know, whatever and whatever. You have to get the y by itself first, okay? (3x plus y equals 4), okay? So once again, our y is not by itself yet, okay? We have to get the y by itself on the other side of the equal sign, okay? So to do that, what's our first step? Move the x. So step 1, move the x. Now I'll write that down over here. Move the x, okay? So that's our step 1. So with step 1, move the x. It's a positive 3x, so to get rid of the positive, we subtract 3x here, subtract 3x here, okay? That crosses out, our y comes down, and remember we can't do that, so we just leave it, negative 3x plus 4. Now once again, we have to have our x first, like it looks in our slope intercept up here, okay? So now we look at our y. Is our y by itself? Yes, there's no negatives, it's positive, so we're done. So now we look and we have our slope, and what's attached to our x? A negative 3 is attached to our x, and our y-intercept, y-intercept would be a positive 4. So we just leave it just like that as positive 4, okay? Simple enough. Let's do one more. (5x minus 2y equals 10), okay? So once again, our y is definitely not by itself this time. We have to get it, remember, by itself, same side of the equal sign. So what's our first step? Our first step is to move the x. So our x is over here. It's a positive 5x. So I do the opposite of plus 5, which is minus 5x here, and minus 5x here, okay? That cancels out, and bring down this whole thing to get negative 2y equals, and then remember, you can't do that, negative 5x plus 10, okay? Now, our second step here is to divide by number attached to the y. Okay. So our first step, move the x. We did that. Our second step, divide by the number attached to the y. So what's attached to the y? We have a negative 2 here. Okay, so to get rid of that negative 2, we must divide both sides by negative 2 and the whole thing, okay? So now that cancels out, and we have y equals, now, if you can do the math over here, when you divide, do it. If you can't, then just leave it as a fraction. So we look, negative 5 over negative 2. Well, we can't do that, but we can see they're both negatives, right? And 2 negatives equals a positive. So we leave it as 5 over 2 x, okay? And then 10 divided by negative 2, well, we know 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5, okay? So now when we do our y's by itself, so our slope, what's attached to our x? 5 over 2. That's a fraction. We just leave it as a fraction, okay? Don't freak out about it. It's just a fraction, okay? We just leave it like that. It'll make sense in the next video. And our y-intercept would be negative 5. Okay, and that's all there is to it. So make sure we're getting y by itself, okay? 2 steps. Move the x and divide by the number attached to the y. If there's no number there, you just leave it, okay? If there's a negative there, you flip your signs. All right, but if the number is there, like here, divide by that on both sides, okay?